What if the history we've been told is only a fraction of the truth? We look at textbooks and timelines as though they're carved in stone, unshakable, complete. But the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and human civilization, cities, writing, machines, makes up barely a flicker of that vast history. So why are there cracks in the story, places where the evidence doesn't fit, where the Earth seems to be whispering about chapters no one wants to acknowledge? Imagine artifacts buried deep in rock that's millions of years old, fossils that don't belong to any known species, and myths shared by cultures, oceans apart yet telling the same chilling stories. Imagine geological layers carrying strange isotopes that look eerily like the scars of nuclear fire, not from our age, but from a time long before us. These are not wild fantasies, they are documented anomalies, fragments that don't fit the narrative, evidence that should have forced us to question everything we think we know. But instead of rewriting history, these discoveries are ignored, silenced, or brushed away as coincidence. And that silence may be the loudest clue of all. Because what if we are not the first to rise on this planet? What if there were others before us? Civilizations as advanced, or more advanced, than ours, erased by catastrophe, war, or something even stranger. Civilizations that lived, thrived, and vanished, leaving behind only whispers in myths, anomalies in stone, and warnings we've chosen not to hear. If that's true, then the story of Earth is not one of progress, but of cycles, civilizations rising, collapsing, and vanishing over and over. And the most haunting thought of all is that we might already be repeating the same path, writing our own disappearance into the rocks of tomorrow. When we talk about the origins of humanity, the story always seems straightforward. Hunter-gatherers became farmers, farmers built villages, villages turned into cities, and eventually civilizations rose. But every so often, discoveries appear that don't fit anywhere in that neat chain. These are the anomalies, the artifacts, the imprints, the objects locked in rock, that should not exist where they are found. They are often dismissed, ridiculed, or buried in archives, but once you line them up, they form a picture too striking to ignore. It is as though fragments of a forgotten age, an earlier wave of intelligence, slip through the cracks of time to remind us that we are not the beginning of the story. One of the most famous of these anomalies is the London hammer, discovered in Texas in the 1930s. At first glance, it looks like a normal old tool, a hammerhead with a wooden handle. But what makes it extraordinary is where it was found, encased in rock more than 100 million years old. According to conventional history, human tools shouldn't even exist until a few thousand years ago, let alone in the age of dinosaurs. Geologists argue over whether the rock formed around the hammer later, creating the illusion of age. But skeptics aside, the fact remains. A clearly manufactured tool is embedded in material that predates humans by a vast gulf of time. If genuine, it means some intelligence was shaping tools when the official story says Earth was ruled only by reptiles. Then there are the Klerksdorp spheres, mysterious metallic objects unearthed in South Africa. Perfectly round, with grooves etched around their circumference, they were found in rock layers estimated to be nearly 3 billion years old. 3 billion years, that's more than half the age of the planet itself. Nature does create spherical shapes, yes, but these objects are too precise, too symmetrical, too deliberate. Metallurgical studies show they are made of materials not normally found in such formations. To believers, they are remnants of an ancient technology, possibly left behind by a civilization predating everything we know. To skeptics, they're dismissed as curiosities of geology. But if even one of these spheres is artificial, it means intelligence existed not just millions, but billions of years before us. Another anomaly is the fossilized footprint found in Glen Rose, Texas, alongside the tracks of dinosaurs. At first glance, it looks like the impression of a human foot, complete with toes and heel, preserved in stone supposedly over 100 million years old. If authentic, it suggests that humans, or something very much like humans, walked the Earth when dinosaurs still roamed. Scientists dismiss it as erosion, a misinterpretation, or even a hoax. But for decades, it has remained a stubborn piece of evidence that refuses to go away. And it is not alone. Around the world, other alleged footprints, handprints, and even shoe prints have been reported in rock layers millions of years older than humans are supposed to be. Could it be that our timeline is wrong? That beings resembling us walked this planet long before our species was officially born. Then there are the metal artifacts, objects that look manufactured, but appear in places where no technology should have existed. In Russia, small metal screws have been reported embedded in rock hundreds of millions of years old. In other cases, nails and even chains have supposedly been found inside coal seams formed long before humanity. Mainstream science dismisses these claims as either mistakes or outright frauds, but the sheer number of such reports makes them difficult to ignore. Even if a fraction are genuine, it suggests that technological societies once existed in epochs long before us, their machines now fossilized into anomalies. Consider also the Dorchester pot, a bell-shaped metal vessel allegedly blasted from solid rock by miners in Massachusetts in 1852. The rock it came from was said to be hundreds of millions of years old, yet the pot was clearly manufactured, decorated with intricate designs. Newspapers of the time reported it, but the artifact itself vanished, slipping into obscurity like so many other inconvenient finds. If real, it would mean metallurgy and artistry existed long before we thought it possible. The list continues with the Coso artifact discovered in California in the 1960s. Encased in geode-like stone was what appeared to be a spark plug, something clearly manufactured. Geological estimates suggested the surrounding material was hundreds of thousands of years old. To skeptics, it was simply a misidentified modern object encased in mineral deposits. But to those willing to see the larger picture, it was another impossible artifact, another fragment of a story erased from history. What all of these anomalies share is their resistance to explanation. Each one on its own could be written off as error, coincidence, or hoax. But taken together, they point toward a troubling possibility, that civilizations have risen before, that intelligence and technology have appeared on Earth not just once, but multiple times, each time erased by catastrophe or collapse, leaving behind only fragments buried in stone. These artifacts are like whispers from a lost world, preserved by chance, breaking through the silence to remind us that we may not be as unique as we think. And then there is the pattern of how these discoveries are treated. When something doesn't fit the official timeline, it is either ignored, mocked, or locked away. The London hammer was dismissed as a curiosity. The Klerksdorp spheres were labelled natural. The Glenrose footprints are derided as hoaxes. The Dorchester pot simply disappeared. Again and again, the same cycle: discovery, shock, dismissal, silence. It is as though there is a deliberate effort to maintain the illusion of a straight line of progress, to erase the possibility of cycles, of vanished civilizations, of forgotten histories. But denial does not erase reality. The evidence remains, stubborn and unsettling, waiting for those willing to look. And the deeper you dig, the more impossible evidence you find, each piece chipping away at the story we've been told. Tools in rock older than humans, footprints beside dinosaurs, metal objects encased in stone, vessels and artifacts where none should exist. These are not just curiosities, they are cracks in the foundation of history. And once you see the cracks, it becomes impossible to unsee them. Because if these artifacts are real, then the story of humanity is far older, stranger, and more cyclical than we dare to imagine. It means that intelligence on Earth is not a one-time event, but a recurring phenomenon, rising again and again, each time erased, each time leaving behind only whispers in stone. And if that's true, then we are not the first to stand here, wondering about the past. We are only the latest. And like those before us, our own artifacts may one day become the impossible evidence of a civilization long vanished. When we think of fossils, we imagine bones turned to stone, seashells embedded in rock, or the occasional plant impression preserved by chance. They are supposed to be the silent storytellers of Earth's past, markers of evolution and extinction. But hidden among the millions of ordinary fossils are outliers, specimens that don't fit the accepted picture, fossils that seem to whisper of histories we're not supposed to know. These are the fossils that don't belong, and like the impossible artifacts, they suggest that life on Earth has been far stranger, far more complex than the tidy narrative of textbooks admits. One of the most puzzling categories of anomalies is human-like remains found in rock strata millions of years too old for our species. In the 19th century, miners in Illinois reported discovering a fossilized human skeleton 90 feet underground. embedded in coal estimated to be more than 300 million years old. The idea is staggering. Anatomically, modern humans are said to have existed only for the last 200,000 years, yet here was a skeleton buried in a geological layer predating even the dinosaurs. Critics claimed misidentification or fraud, but the report persists, haunting the edges of accepted science. Similar discoveries surfaced elsewhere. In the 1880s, fossilized human footprints were claimed in coal seams in Pennsylvania, their impressions unmistakable, yet dismissed as impossible. If even one of these accounts is genuine, it rewrites the entire story of human history. Then there are fossils of creatures that seem to blend categories, hybrids that should not exist. In Peru, fossilized skulls have been found with elongated crania, far larger than typical human proportions. Skeptics argue these are the result of cranial binding, a cultural practice of reshaping skulls. Yet others point to differences in cranial volume and sutures that suggest these were not modified humans, but beings altogether different. Are they evidence of another intelligent species that once walked alongside us, only to vanish without a trace? Or are they the fossilized echoes of civilizations erased long before recorded history began? Even more baffling are the fossils of advanced life forms that appear millions of years before they should. Trilobites, extinct marine arthropods, are among the oldest creatures in the fossil record, vanishing about 250 million years ago. Yet in Utah, a fossilized human shoe print was allegedly discovered with a crushed trilobite embedded in it. The implications are staggering. A shoe-wearing being stepped on a trilobite when our species was not supposed to exist for another 249 million years. Mainstream explanations insist this must be a hoax or misinterpretation, yet the find remains one of the most cited anomalies in paleontology circles. Could it be that intelligent life capable of wearing shoes existed in the Paleozoic era, only to be erased by one of Earth's many cataclysms? Out-of-place fossils also include plants and animals appearing in strata where they don't belong. Fossils of advanced flowering plants have been reported in rock layers dating back to the Carboniferous period, long before such plants were thought to evolve. Likewise, mammal-like fossils sometimes appear in the age of dinosaurs, as if evolution happened in parallel or in cycles we don't yet understand. In places like Mexico, stone carvings depict creatures resembling dinosaurs, even though humans are said to have appeared millions of years after dinosaurs went extinct. Could these be cultural memories of coexistence, or are they artistic inventions that just happen to mirror creatures we only rediscovered in modern paleontology? Perhaps the most unsettling anomalies come in the form of what some call living fossils. Creatures thought to be extinct for millions of years suddenly appear alive and unchanged. The coelacanth, a fish believed to have vanished 65 million years ago, was discovered alive in 1938 off the coast of South Africa. More recently, a species of tree known only from Jurassic fossils was found growing in Australia. If these organisms can persist undetected for tens of millions of years, what else might be hiding? Could intelligent species or remnants of lost civilizations have endured, unseen, in ways we can't yet imagine? The persistence of living fossils suggests that our fossil record is incomplete at best, misleading at worst. If entire species can vanish and reappear, what confidence can we have that we understand the full story of life on Earth? There is also the mystery of sudden disappearances in the fossil record. Entire species appear, flourish, and vanish abruptly, with no clear evolutionary path in or out. Mainstream science calls these mass extinction events, caused by asteroid impacts or climate shifts. But some of these vanishings look suspiciously abrupt, as though orchestrated rather than accidental. Could advanced civilizations have played a role, altering ecosystems, wiping out species, or even resetting the planet? It may sound far-fetched, but when you examine the sudden disappearance of mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and countless other species, the pattern feels deliberate, almost as if Earth itself was scrubbed clean to make room for something new. And woven through these anomalies are the fossilized remains of tools, not bones. Stone hammers, spheres, and objects shaped too deliberately to be natural have been found in ancient strata, sometimes alongside fossils of creatures that shouldn't exist together. In South America, reports describe fossilized imprints of tools embedded in solid rock millions of years old. If genuine, these finds suggest that advanced tool-making species walked the Earth long before us. Yet, like so many anomalies, they are quickly dismissed, ridiculed, or silenced. What ties all of these fossil mysteries together is not just their strangeness, but their consistency. Across continents, across decades, fossils emerge that don't fit, hinting at lost chapters of Earth's history. Sometimes they suggest humans, or human-like beings, existed far earlier than we admit. Sometimes they point to species erased without explanation. Sometimes they whisper of civilizations advanced enough to leave behind imprints of shoes, tools, or technology in stone. Each time the establishment pushes back, insisting the evidence must be flawed. Yet the anomalies remain, refusing to disappear, like bones jutting out from beneath the carefully paved surface of official history. The fossils that don't belong remind us that Earth is a graveyard not just of species, but of civilizations. Life here is fragile, cyclical, and often erased. The record we have is only partial, only a sliver of the full story. And if fossils of creatures, tools, and beings appear where they should not, it may be because the story of life on Earth is not linear but cyclical, rising and falling in waves, with each wave leaving only fragments for the next to puzzle over. We're accustomed to thinking of ourselves as the pinnacle, the inevitable outcome of evolution. But the fossils that don't belong suggest something far more humbling, that we are not the first, and perhaps not the last, to walk this path. The Earth itself is a memory keeper, a vast archive etched into stone, ice, and soil. Every layer of rock is a page in a history book that stretches back billions of years. Every chemical trace a signature of something that once lived, burned, or was destroyed. And yet, just like with impossible artifacts and out-of-place fossils, the deeper we look, the more anomalies we find, marks in the very geology of the planet that shouldn't exist if the story we've been told is complete. These geological anomalies aren't just curiosities. They are scars, fingerprints, and echoes of events that defy conventional explanation. They may be the most damning evidence that Earth has hosted civilizations before us, ones that left their mark not with ruins, but with signatures in the rocks themselves. One of the most unsettling of these anomalies is the Oklo phenomenon in Gabon, Africa. Discovered in the 1970s, this site contains evidence of nuclear fission that occurred nearly 2 billion years ago. Mainstream science explains this as a natural nuclear reactor, created when uranium-rich deposits interacted with groundwater in just the right conditions. But critics point out how staggeringly improbable this scenario is. The Oklo site shows controlled reactions, leaving behind isotopic ratios almost identical to what modern reactors produce. To believe this was an accident is to accept one of the most extraordinary coincidences in geological history. To others, it looks like the remnants of advanced technology, the scar of a nuclear process operated by a civilization that vanished long before ours. If that's true, then humanity is not pioneering nuclear power, we're rediscovering it. Then there are the sudden spikes of carbon and methane trapped in ice cores and sediments. In some layers, millions of years old, the chemical record shows massive emissions eerily similar to what we are producing today through industrialization. Mainstream explanations blame volcanoes or natural climate shifts, but the chemical patterns match modern fossil fuel pollution too closely to ignore. Could this be the fingerprint of a prior industrial age, a civilization that burned through resources and collapsed, leaving behind only chemical scars in the air and ocean? If so, then climate change is not just our crisis. It is a recurring cycle of self-destruction that civilizations before us also triggered. Plastics add another unsettling clue. Studies have found traces of synthetic polymers buried in sediments older than they should be, suggesting contamination from deep within Earth's past. While some claim these are simply misdated modern plastics, the possibility remains chilling, that earlier societies created synthetic materials that endured long after they were gone, just as ours will. Plastics degrade slowly, but eventually they fuse into rock, creating what geologists now call plastiglomerates. Millions of years from now, these strange hybrid stones will outlive us as the clearest geological trace of our existence. If similar materials already exist in ancient layers, they may be the fingerprints of forgotten civilizations, buried in plain sight. Geological anomalies also appear in the form of vitrified stones, ancient rocks melted into glass by extreme heat. Across Scotland, hill forts built in prehistoric times contain walls where the stone itself has been fused, as if exposed to temperatures far beyond what simple fires could produce. Archaeologists struggle to explain this, suggesting accidental burning or unknown techniques of construction. But the vitrification bears an eerie resemblance to what happens when sand melts into glass under the blast of a nuclear explosion. Could these be the remnants of forgotten wars, battles fought with weapons far beyond what their era should have possessed? The same phenomenon has been noted in parts of India, where layers of ancient glassy debris suggest catastrophic heat events that left the ground scarred for millennia. Another anomaly lies in sudden extinction layers, thin bands of sediment that mark the abrupt end of entire eras. The most famous is the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, where the dinosaurs vanished 65 million years ago, leaving behind a layer rich in iridium, an element more common in asteroids than Earth's crust. The asteroid explanation is now mainstream, but not all extinction layers are so easily explained. Some show chemical signatures of sudden atmospheric poisoning, sharp rises in radioactivity, or deposits of soot that suggest massive global fires. Were these truly random accidents of nature, or could they have been the result of industrial collapse, nuclear war, or deliberate destruction by civilizations long before us? The Earth remembers the events, but not the perpetrators, leaving us only with the scars to wonder about. Magnetic anomalies add to the puzzle. The Earth's magnetic field has flipped countless times, recorded in the alignment of iron particles in rock, but in some layers, the changes appear unnaturally abrupt, as though the flips occurred far faster than natural processes should allow. Could advanced technology, tampering with energy fields on a planetary scale, have left these sudden imprints? Some researchers suggest ancient civilizations may have harnessed forces we barely understand, altering the planet itself in ways that only geology could preserve. Even more mysterious are the so-called fossilized cities. In multiple locations, deep underground, explorers have reported structures that look like walls, pavements, or bricks, embedded in stone millions of years old. In Oklahoma in the 1960s, miners reported uncovering what appeared to be a massive stone wall 100 feet below the surface, in strata dating back more than 200 million years. In Russia, strange patterns resembling geometric pavements have been found in deep geological layers, sparking speculation about ancient construction buried by time. Mainstream science dismisses these as natural formations, the result of crystallization or erosion. But the patterns are too regular, too deliberate to be brushed aside so easily. If genuine, they would be evidence of civilizations buried not just under soil, but under the weight of geological epochs. And then there are the anomalies found in ice. Ice cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica contain layers going back hundreds of thousands of years, recording the chemical history of the atmosphere. Yet some cores reveal sudden spikes of radioactive isotopes, traces that suggest nuclear activity tens of thousands of years before modern humans developed such technology. Again, mainstream science explains them as solar flares or cosmic events, but the patterns match nuclear testing signatures uncannily well. If advanced societies existed before us, their destruction may be written in the frozen memory of the poles, preserved long after their ruins crumbled. The common thread in all of these anomalies is that they point to cycles of rise, technological achievement, environmental impact, and sudden collapse. Each time, the civilization vanishes, but the Earth remembers, preserving only fragments in stone, ice, or soil. These fragments look impossible because we insist on a linear story of progress, from cavemen to space travel. But the geological record suggests otherwise. It hints that we are not the first to burn, to build, to destroy, and to vanish. We are simply the latest. The most haunting part is how familiar the patterns look. Carbon spikes, mass extinctions, synthetic residues, nuclear isotopes. These are the same marks we are leaving behind right now. We imagine our civilization as permanent, yet millions of years from now, all that will remain of us are the same anomalies, the same scars, the same inexplicable traces. Future beings will puzzle over them, dismiss them as coincidence, and perhaps never realize we existed, just as we now puzzle over those who came before. Geological anomalies are not accidents. They are the planet's way of keeping score, its impartial record of what has happened before. And if we have the courage to read that record honestly, it tells us one chilling truth. We are not the first civilization on Earth. We may not even be the most advanced. We are only the most recent, and unless we learn from the scars etched into stone, we too will become just another anomaly in the endless archive of the Earth. History books call myths stories, imaginative tales created by ancient people to explain the world around them. But what if myths are not stories at all? What if they are records, memories passed down through generations in the only way possible, when writing was rare and survival was everything? Around the world, civilizations separated by oceans and thousands of years tell tales that echo each other with uncanny similarity. Floods that wiped out the world, gods who descended from the sky with advanced knowledge, weapons of unimaginable power that leveled entire cities, and cycles of rise and collapse that sound eerily like the anomalies etched in stone. These myths may not be fantasy. They may be coded history, survival manuals compressed into stories so they could endure when everything else was erased. The flood story is perhaps the clearest example. From the Bible's tale of Noah to the Sumerian account of Ziusudra and Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, to the Hindu story of Manu warned by a divine fish, to the legends of flood survivors among Native American, Aboriginal Australian and Polynesian cultures, every continent holds the same memory. The Earth drowned, humanity nearly perished, and a chosen few carried forward the spark of civilization. Skeptics argue these are exaggerated memories of local floods. Why would every culture describe a global catastrophe, complete with warnings, arcs, and chosen survivors? Perhaps they are all remembering the same event, a sudden, planet-wide reset that wiped out civilizations advanced enough to leave myths but not ruins. If that is true, then myths are not allegory. They are history, preserved in symbolic form so it could outlive the disaster that erased everything else. But floods are only one repeating theme. Another is the arrival of gods or sky beings who bring knowledge humanity should not have had at the time. The Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, powerful beings who descended from the heavens to teach writing, architecture and law. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl was said to have gifted agriculture, astronomy and mathematics. In India, the Vedic texts describe devas and asuras, sky beings who flew in vimanas, machines described with technical detail, armed with weapons of fire and light. Even in Polynesian myths, gods arrived from the stars, teaching navigation across the oceans. These stories are striking because they describe knowledge that leapt far beyond what primitive societies should have developed on their own. Why would people invent stories of flying machines and sky visitors unless they were remembering something real, something passed down from encounters with survivors of earlier civilizations or perhaps with beings not of this earth at all? Then there are the myths of weapons too advanced to fit the ages they describe. In the Mahabharata, one of India's great epics, weapons are described that sound chillingly like modern nuclear arms. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns that reduced everything to ash. Survivors' hair and nails fell out, food was poisoned, and birds dropped from the sky, symptoms that sound exactly like radiation sickness. In Norse mythology, the gods wielded hammers and spears that summoned thunder and lightning, levelling armies in moments. In Greek tales, Zeus hurled bolts of fire from the heavens, while Prometheus gave humanity the secret of fire stolen from the gods. Are these myths just allegories for storms and fire, or are they distorted memories of technologies too dangerous and too powerful for their time? The details are too precise, too universal, to be dismissed as simple metaphor. They may be the last surviving record of wars fought with advanced weapons in civilizations that came before ours. Wars so catastrophic they destroyed not only their cities, but nearly the entire species, leaving only symbolic echoes in myth. Cosmic knowledge also appears in myth with unsettling consistency. The Dogon tribe of Mali tells stories of beings from the Sirius star system, who visited them in ancient times. They described Sirius as a binary star system, with a dense, invisible companion star. This knowledge was confirmed only in the 19th century by modern astronomers, yet the Dogon had preserved it for centuries through oral tradition. How could they know such precise astronomical details without telescopes? Mainstream science suggests contamination by modern contact, but the Dogon insist the knowledge has been with them for generations, gifted by the visitors they call the Nomo. Whether literal or symbolic, the myth records knowledge far beyond what was possible for an isolated tribe. Could this be a memory of contact with an advanced civilization, long gone, but remembered in story? Even creation myths may be distorted records of cycles of rise and fall. The Hopi speak of multiple worlds, each destroyed by fire, flood, or ice, with survivors guided into the next. The Aztecs described the 5 suns, ages of humanity, each ending in catastrophe. The Norse spoke of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, when fire and ice would consume the world before it was reborn. In Hinduism, time is cyclical, with civilizations rising and collapsing in endless kalpas, repeating forever. These myths do not describe linear progress but cycles, just as the geological record shows cycles of extinction and renewal. If myths are records, then they are telling us what the rocks already whisper. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, and the pattern repeats endlessly. What makes myths so compelling as records is their endurance. Buildings crumble, artifacts corrode, and cities are buried, but stories survive, passed from parent to child, encoded in religion, ritual, and song. Over generations, details shift, language changes, symbols replace specifics, but the core survives. That is why myths from cultures separated by oceans still tell the same stories. The flood, the fire from the sky, the gods descending with knowledge, the cycles of destruction and renewal. They are not coincidence. They are the memory of humanity, or of civilizations before humanity, compressed into forms that could outlast catastrophe. And yet, because they come to us as myth, we dismiss them. We laugh at the idea of gods and flying machines or weapons of fire as allegory. We call flood stories exaggerations. We interpret cycles of destruction as metaphor. But what if the ancients were not telling us stories? What if they were warning us, preserving what little they could in the only form that could endure? If that is true, then ignoring myths is not just a mistake, it is a tragedy. Because hidden in those stories may be the very lessons we need to avoid the same fate as those who came before. The power of myths lies in how they connect directly to anomalies in the physical record. Floods described in story align with sudden sea level rises in geology. Weapons of fire match radioactive isotopes in ancient strata. Sky beings gifting knowledge echo unexplained leaps in ancient technology. The match is too close to ignore. Myths and geology are telling the same story, one in stone, one in story. Together, they reveal a history of forgotten civilizations, erased yet remembered, silenced yet still whispering to those willing to listen. Myths are not fantasies. They are fossils of memory. They may be distorted, symbolic, and incomplete, but they are the only voice the past has left us. And if we pay attention, they tell us not only what happened before, but what will happen again. Civilizations will rise, they will reach too far, and they will fall. The survivors will pass on their warnings as stories, and the cycle will begin again. The question is not whether the myths are true. The question is whether we are listening. When we think of technology, we imagine sleek machines, glowing screens, and the marvels of modern engineering. We imagine ourselves as pioneers, standing on the cutting edge of innovation. But what if we are not pioneers at all? What if the gadgets, structures, and tools we marvel at today are merely rediscoveries of something far older, echoes of knowledge once known and then lost? Across the globe, scattered remnants suggest that ancient civilizations possessed technologies far beyond what their time should have allowed. Some of these hints lie in stone, others in mathematics, and others still in myths that describe machines too advanced for their era. These fragments form a picture of a forgotten chapter in human history, a time when knowledge and power surged to incredible heights, only to vanish, leaving behind nothing but whispers of ancient technology and lost knowledge. Consider the pyramids of Giza. Officially, they were built around 4,500 years ago by the ancient Egyptians using ropes, ramps, and sheer manpower. Yet even today, engineers debate how such colossal structures could have been raised with primitive tools. The precision with which the stones are cut, so exact that even a razor blade cannot fit between them, suggests techniques far more advanced than copper chisels and stone hammers. The alignment of the pyramids with the stars, particularly Orion's belt, displays astronomical knowledge supposedly beyond their reach. Were they simply geniuses with simple tools, or were they inheritors of knowledge passed down from an earlier age, survivors of a civilization that had already mastered engineering and astronomy? If the latter, then the pyramids are not just tombs, they are monuments to lost technology. The same mystery surrounds Machu Picchu and other Incan sites in Peru. The stonework there defies explanation. Massive boulders carved and fitted together without mortar, interlocking so precisely they have survived earthquakes for centuries. Some stones have up to 12 angles carved with such perfection that they lock like puzzle pieces. How did the Incas, with supposedly no iron tools or wheel-based machinery, achieve such feats? The mainstream explanation is skill and patience, but hidden within the stonework are hints of something more, scorch marks and glassy surfaces that suggest the use of high heat or advanced cutting techniques. Could they have possessed technology that allowed them to shape stone at a molecular level, technology that was lost when their civilization collapsed? Ancient technology also appears in the realm of energy. In Baghdad, archaeologists discovered what is now called the Baghdad Battery, clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods, capable of generating an electric charge when filled with acidic liquid. Officially, this is dismissed as coincidence, or at best a primitive experiment. Yet the design is identical to what we would recognise as a galvanic cell, a battery. If this artefact is genuine, it suggests the ancients knew how to harness electricity long before Benjamin Franklin flew his kite or Edison lit a bulb. What might they have powered with such devices? Did they illuminate temples, electroplate metals, or experiment with technologies we cannot even guess at? The question is less about what they did with it, and more about why it disappeared. Other artifacts hint at advanced mechanical knowledge. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered off the coast of Greece, is a bronze device more than 2,000 years old. Dubbed the world's first computer, it used complex gears to track the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with astonishing accuracy. Nothing comparable would reappear in Europe until the development of intricate clocks more than a millennium later. Who built it, and where did they get the knowledge to craft such a device? If this one mechanism survived, how many others were lost to time, buried in shipwrecks, destroyed by war, or simply ground to dust? The Antikythera mechanism is not just an artifact, it is evidence that advanced knowledge has surfaced before, only to vanish in the tides of history. We also find hints of lost technology in legends. The Vedic texts of India describe vimanas, flying machines capable of traversing the skies and even space. They are detailed with descriptions of propulsion systems, weapons of light, and aerial battles. Skeptics call them mythological, but why would ancient people invent flying machines with such technical detail thousands of years before the invention of airplanes? The Mahabharata and Ramayana speak of wars fought with weapons that sound chillingly modern, projectiles that explode with the brilliance of the sun, scorching everything for miles around. Are these poetic metaphors, or garbled memories of technologies lost to time? If we strip away the mythology, what remains is the startling possibility that ancient civilizations once mastered flight, energy, and even weaponry far beyond their age. Lost knowledge also hides in mathematics and architecture. The Mayans built pyramids aligned with astronomical events, tracking solstices and eclipses with incredible precision. Their calendar predicted celestial cycles with accuracy rivaling modern astronomy. The Sumerians used a base 60 number system that still defines how we measure time. The ancient Greeks knew the Earth was round and calculated its circumference with surprising accuracy. How did these cultures, separated by geography and time, all achieve such advanced understanding? Was it genius, coincidence, or inheritance from a much older source of knowledge now erased? There are also rumours of technologies that vanish mysteriously. Ancient India was said to possess the knowledge of mercury-based propulsion. Chinese legends describe mirrors that could see across great distances. Native American traditions speak of crystals used for communication and healing. Even Plato, in his dialogues on Atlantis, described a civilization with advanced engineering and knowledge of energy. Were these stories exaggerations, or are they fragments of a real technological heritage we have forgotten? And then there is the question of why so much knowledge disappeared. Fires destroyed the Library of Alexandria, erasing thousands of scrolls. Conquests wiped out entire civilizations, their knowledge burned or buried. Natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, consumed cities and their secrets. What if these are not just random losses, but part of a cycle? Civilizations rise, achieve brilliance and collapse. Survivors scatter, carrying fragments of memory, passing them on as myths, rituals, or half-remembered practices. Over time, the fragments grow distorted until they are dismissed as fantasy. Then, centuries or millennia later, a new civilization rediscovers the same knowledge, marvels at its brilliance, and believes itself to be the first. But the Earth knows better. The Earth has seen it all before. What makes these hints of ancient technology so compelling is not just the artifacts or the stories, but how they mirror our own world. We too build machines to fly, weapons of devastating power, tools of precision, and sources of energy we barely understand. We too believe we are permanent. But the ruins and legends tell a different story, that others stood here before us, holding the same pride, wielding the same knowledge, only to vanish. Their machines are gone, their knowledge scattered, their names erased. All that remains are stones cut too precisely, devices too advanced, and myths too detailed to ignore. Ancient technology and lost knowledge are not fantasy. They are the echoes of forgotten civilizations. They remind us that progress is not linear but cyclical, that brilliance has flared before, only to be extinguished. And they warn us too that what we believe to be unshakable may crumble faster than we think. Because if the ancients knew what we know, or even more, and they still vanished, what hope do we have unless we finally learn the lesson hidden in the ruins and the myths? When people talk about lost civilizations, the conversation usually begins with Atlantis. Plato's story of a powerful island nation that sank beneath the waves has fueled centuries of speculation. Some dismiss it as allegory, a cautionary tale about pride and hubris. Others search for it beneath the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, or even Antarctica. But Atlantis is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Around the world, myths, ruins, and unexplained sites point to vanished cities and civilizations, cultures that rose to greatness and then collapsed so completely that only fragments remain. These are not just stories, they are clues to a forgotten past, one that may hold the key to understanding our own future. Take Dwarka in India, long thought to be mythical. Ancient texts described it as the glittering city of Lord Krishna, filled with palaces of gold and jewels, eventually swallowed by the sea. For centuries it was dismissed as legend. But in 2001, divers off the coast of Gujarat discovered ruins submerged beneath the waves. Stone structures, walls and streets arranged in geometric patterns appeared in waters where no such settlement should exist. Carbon dating suggested they were at least 9,000 years old, predating known Indian civilization by millennia. Was Dwarka real all along, its destruction preserved in both stone and story? And if so, how many other myths are waiting to be rediscovered beneath the ocean? Another stunning example lies off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument. Discovered by a diver in the 1980s, it is a massive underwater structure featuring terraces, steps, and platforms cut with eerie precision. Some argue it is a natural formation, the product of tectonic shifts and erosion, yet its straight lines, right angles and symmetrical design suggest otherwise. If it is man-made, it could date back 10,000 years or more, a time when mainstream history insists humans were simple hunter-gatherers. If true, Yonaguni is not just a ruin, it is evidence of an advanced civilization lost beneath the waves, forgotten except for faint echoes in Japanese myths of cities swallowed by the sea. South America too holds its mysteries. Beneath the waters of Lake Titicaca, divers have found ruins resembling temples and roads. On land, sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia baffle archaeologists. Giant stone blocks, some weighing hundreds of tons, are cut with such precision that they interlock like modern machine parts. Drill holes, sharp edges, and perfectly straight grooves suggest advanced tools. Yet Pumapunku is thousands of years old, built by a people whose technology should not have been capable of such feats. Some say it was the work of the Tiwanaku culture. Others believe it was the remnant of something much older, perhaps a civilization erased long before recorded history. Whoever built it, the craftsmanship suggests a knowledge of engineering lost to the world after their fall. In the deserts of Egypt, beyond the well-known pyramids and temples, whispers of hidden cities persist. Satellite imagery reveals patterns beneath the sand, rectangles, lines, and formations that look eerily like the outlines of buried structures. Some researchers believe entire cities remain hidden under layers of desert, consumed by time and shifting sands. If unearthed, they could rewrite the timeline of Egyptian history. The pyramids themselves, aligned with celestial events and built with precision unmatched even today, may be the last monuments of an earlier culture, absorbed and reinterpreted by the dynasties that came later. What if the Egyptians inherited ruins rather than built them? What if their civilization was not the first, but one of many in a much older cycle? The Americas hold their own tales of vanished greatness. The city of Cahokia, near modern-day St. Louis, was once a sprawling metropolis larger than London in the Middle Ages. With complex mounds, plazas, and astronomical alignments, it was a centre of culture and power. Yet by the time Europeans arrived, it had been abandoned for centuries. No one knows why. Disease, famine, warfare, all are possibilities. But its sudden disappearance mirrors countless other cities that flourished and fell, their knowledge lost, their ruins left to be swallowed by forests and rivers. Multiply Cahokia by hundreds, and you glimpse the scale of forgotten civilizations across the world. Even Antarctica is not free from speculation. Beneath its thick ice, radar surveys have revealed strange geometric formations, structures that look suspiciously artificial. Some believe these are natural ice and rock formations. Others argue they could be remnants of a civilization buried when the continent froze thousands of years ago. Legends of Atlantis and other sunken cities are sometimes linked here, with theories suggesting that a once temperate Antarctica could have hosted advanced societies before a sudden pole shift plunged it into ice. While definitive proof remains elusive, the possibility lingers like a shadow over the frozen continent. What all of these examples share is the haunting pattern of rise and collapse. Civilizations build, flourish, and dominate their environments. Then catastrophe strikes. Floods, earthquakes, volcanoes, climate shifts, wars. And they vanish. Survivors scatter, carrying fragments of memory that eventually become myth. Over generations, the stories twist into legend, and the ruins sink into sea or soil. To later ages, these people seem like impossibilities. Their cities like fantasy. But the stones and ruins tell another story, that humanity has risen to greatness many times before, only to fall and be forgotten. The deeper question is why so many of these vanished cities lie beneath the sea. During the last ice age, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than today. As the ice melted, vast stretches of land were swallowed by rising waters. Entire coastal civilizations would have been wiped out, their cities drowned in a matter of decades. The survivors, fleeing inland, would carry memories of their homes swallowed by the ocean. Is it any wonder that nearly every culture has a flood myth, a story of a world-ending deluge? The drowned ruins of Dwarka, Yonaguni, and countless others may be the real-world counterparts to those myths, evidence of a planetary catastrophe that erased entire cultures in a single generation. But even beyond natural disaster, there are hints of something darker. Some myths describe not just floods but wars. Wars fought with weapons of fire, storms unleashed by the gods, and battles that left cities in ruins. Could some civilizations have destroyed themselves, their technologies turned inward in conflicts so devastating that they erased their own existence? If so, then history is not just a story of natural disasters, but of self-destruction, a cycle of brilliance undone by hubris. Vanished cities and civilizations remind us of our own fragility. We build skyscrapers, megacities, and networks that seem indestructible. But so did they, in their own way. And just like them, we are vulnerable to disaster, whether natural or self-inflicted. Their ruins are not just relics, they are warnings. They tell us that collapse is not a possibility but a pattern, one that has played out countless times before. The only question is whether we'll learn from their fate or repeat it, leaving our own cities to sink beneath the waves, to crumble in the desert, or to be buried in ice, waiting to be rediscovered by a future civilization wondering who we were. Every civilization imagines itself as permanent, yet history tells a different story. Over and over, societies rise to brilliance only to collapse, leaving behind ruins, myths, and anomalies that puzzle those who come later. What ties these collapses together is not just their suddenness, but their scale. Again and again, the Earth has been swept clean by catastrophe, sometimes natural, sometimes self-inflicted, so complete that only fragments survive. These are not just isolated tragedies, they are global resets, moments when the clock of civilization is turned back to zero, forcing survivors to rebuild from the ashes. The deeper we look into geology, myths, and archaeology, the more evidence we find that catastrophic endings are not exceptions but the rule. The most famous reset is the one that ended the age of the dinosaurs. Around 65 million years ago, an asteroid struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing the energy of billions of nuclear bombs. Firestorms engulfed continents, dust blotted out the sun, and within years, 3/4 of all species were gone. Dinosaurs ruled for over 160 million years, but in an instant, they were erased. For us, it is a reminder that no matter how powerful a species becomes, a single event can wipe it away. But here is the unsettling part. If catastrophes can erase entire classes of life, how many times might civilizations have risen and fallen in the gaps? The asteroid didn't just end an age, it cleared the stage for something new. That pattern repeats throughout Earth's history. Consider the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to Ice Age conditions about 12,800 years ago. Evidence suggests it was triggered by a comet impact or fragments striking the Earth. Shocked quartz, nanodiamonds, and layers of soot appear in sediments across North America and Europe, marking a global cataclysm. The timing is suspicious, coinciding with the collapse of the Clovis culture, one of the earliest known advanced societies in North America. At the same time, myths of fire raining from the sky, floods sweeping the Earth, and civilizations drowned appear in cultures worldwide. The sudden sea level rise that followed, nearly 400 feet in just a few centuries, would have swallowed coastal cities everywhere. To mainstream history, this is just the story of climate change. But to those who connect the dots, it looks like the great flood myths, the destruction of Atlantis, and the reset of human civilization rolled into one. Survivors may have carried fragments of knowledge forward, but their world was gone, erased by a catastrophe they could not prevent. Catastrophes don't always come from space. Volcanoes too have unleashed destruction on a scale that reshaped the world. Around 74,000 years ago, Mount Toba in Indonesia erupted in one of the largest volcanic events in human history. Ash blanketed the skies, triggering a volcanic winter that lasted years. Some scientists believe humanity was reduced to just a few thousand survivors during this period. If true, then everything we know today, pyramids, the internet, space travel, descends from a remnant that barely clung to life. Catastrophe is not just possible, it is embedded in our DNA, shaping the story of who we are. Earthquakes too have erased civilizations. The Minoan culture on Crete, flourishing nearly 4,000 years ago, was brought to its knees by a volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern Santorini. The eruption was so powerful, it created tsunamis that devastated coastal cities, darkened the skies, and crippled agriculture for years. Myths of Atlantis may have originated from this disaster, passed down as memory of a powerful society undone by fire and water. In South America, earthquakes toppled the mighty walls of ancient cities like Tiwanaku, scattering their people and erasing their culture. In each case, nature was the executioner, striking without warning, ending ages of human achievement in hours. But not every catastrophe is natural. Some appear to be self-inflicted. In India's epic texts, descriptions of weapons that unleashed columns of fire brighter than 10,000 suns sound chillingly like nuclear explosions. The aftermath, poisoned food, hair and nails falling out, matches radiation sickness. Could these be garbled memories of wars fought with weapons so powerful they destroyed not just armies, but civilizations? Skeptics dismiss them as allegory, yet the details are too precise to ignore. In the 20th century, when humanity created nuclear bombs, it suddenly became clear that the myths might not be fantasy but warnings. If earlier civilizations reached a similar level of technological power, they may have destroyed themselves, leaving only scorched ruins and stories of gods wielding fire from the sky. Global resets also appear in the form of pandemics. The Black Death in the 14th century killed up to half of Europe's population, shattering societies, collapsing economies, and rewriting history. Yet compared to earlier resets, it was small. Imagine pandemics stretching further back, their traces lost in prehistory. wiping out entire civilizations we don't even know existed. Even diseases can act as the great erasers, leveling humanity and forcing survivors to start over with little more than memory. One of the strangest aspects of catastrophic endings is how they align with cycles described in myth. The Mayans spoke of suns, or ages, each destroyed by disaster, floods, fire, earthquakes, before a new world emerged. The Hopi described similar cycles of worlds rising and falling, with survivors guided to safety by spiritual forces. In Hindu cosmology, time itself is cyclical, with civilizations rising in golden ages before declining into darkness and collapse, only to begin again. What mainstream historians dismiss as allegory may be collective memory, passed down by survivors who saw worlds end and wanted their descendants to remember that nothing lasts forever. What makes these resets even more haunting is how closely they mirror our present. Rising carbon in the atmosphere, sudden warming, mass extinctions, plastic embedded in sediments. These are the same kinds of geological scars left by past collapses. If a future civilization were to dig into the rocks we leave behind, they would see the same signs we see in the past. Sudden shifts, unexplained layers of soot and ash, radioactive isotopes scattered across the globe. They would wonder what happened to us just as we wonder what happened to those before. The cycles are not just myth, they are repeating patterns etched into the earth itself. And yet civilizations always imagine they are immune. The Romans thought their empire eternal until it crumbled. The Maya built great cities only to watch them swallowed by jungle. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Harappans all believed their greatness permanent, only to collapse into obscurity. If we think we are different, the evidence of history says otherwise. Our cities, our machines, our knowledge, they are fragile as those who came before us. The lesson of catastrophic endings and global resets is not despair, but humility. They remind us that civilization is not guaranteed, that nature is indifferent, and that hubris often invites disaster. They warn us that brilliance and power do not protect against collapse, and that the only survivors are those who adapt, remember, and rebuild. But they also whisper something more chilling, that perhaps this cycle is not just chance, perhaps it is inevitable, woven into the fabric of Earth itself. Civilizations rise, they burn bright, and then they fall, leaving behind only ruins, myths, and anomalies for the next to puzzle over. We are used to thinking of time as a line, moving forward, progress building on progress. But the evidence suggests something else entirely. Time, for civilizations, may be a circle, and if that is true, then we're not heading into uncharted territory, but walking a path already trodden countless times before. The catastrophes of the past are not warnings of what could happen, they are reminders of what will happen, again and again. The only question is how we will face our reset when it comes, and what fragments of memory we will leave for those who come after. Every great collapse leaves behind survivors. History remembers the ruins, the myths, and sometimes the ashes, but rarely does it dwell on those few who endured. Yet it is the survivors, the scattered remnants of shattered civilizations, who carry the seeds of the future. They are the ones who rebuild, who preserve fragments of knowledge, and who encode memories into stories, songs, and rituals. Without them, every catastrophe would have erased humanity entirely. And so, the survivors of forgotten civilizations may be the most important figures in history, not because they ruled or built, but because they remembered. Myths across the world tell of chosen survivors. In the Sumerian tale of Utnapishtim, he is warned by the gods of a flood and builds an ark, carrying life into the next age. In the Bible, Noah fulfills the same role. In Hindu mythology, Manu is guided by a divine fish to build a boat that will save him from the deluge. Among the Hopi, survivors are led into caves or hidden places where they endure until it's safe to emerge. What unites these stories is the theme of preservation, not just of life, but of knowledge. The survivors are not random, they are chosen, warned or guided because they carry something essential, whether that is memory, skill, or wisdom. Some traditions even describe secret groups of knowledge keepers. The Mayans spoke of the Lords of Time, guardians who preserved the cycles of history. The Egyptians had the followers of Horus, semi-divine beings who ruled before the pharaohs and supposedly carried knowledge from an earlier age. In India, legends speak of the 9 unknown men, a secret society entrusted with powerful knowledge after a devastating war. Are these just myths? Or are they distorted memories of real groups who carried knowledge across collapses? If so, they may explain why civilizations separated by oceans seem to inherit the same fragments of wisdom: astronomy, mathematics, sacred geometry, and myths of floods and fire. One striking pattern is how survivors often retreat to hidden or high places. After the Younger Dryas event, as sea levels rose and coastal cities drowned, many survivors fled inland or upward. That may be why so many ancient sacred sites are located on mountains, plateaus, and other elevated ground. Machu Picchu in Peru, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, or Tiwanaku in Bolivia. Perhaps these sites were not chosen simply for religious reasons, but because they were refuges, built by survivors of an earlier world who knew the lowlands were doomed. High ground was safety, and there they rebuilt, encoding fragments of their lost world into stone so it would endure. Göbekli Tepe is one of the most astonishing examples. Built around 12,000 years ago, it predates farming, pottery, and cities. Yet it features massive stone pillars carved with animals, symbols, and intricate designs. Mainstream archaeologists call it the world's first temple, but why would hunter-gatherers build such an advanced site, with symbolism and astronomical alignments, if they had no permanent settlements? One explanation is that they didn't build it from nothing. They inherited the knowledge from survivors of an earlier civilization, one wiped out by the cataclysm at the end of the Ice Age. Göbekli Tepe may not be the beginning of civilization, but the restart, created by survivors carrying memory forward into a new world. Survivors also appear in oral traditions, often as teachers. After floods and fires, legends describe strangers arriving to guide the rebuilding. In Mesoamerican myths, Quetzalcoatl appears as a pale, bearded figure who brings agriculture, astronomy, and laws. In Andean traditions, Viracocha arrives after a great flood to teach people skills and order. In Mesopotamia, Oans, a being who emerged from the sea, taught humanity writing, science, and architecture. These figures are often portrayed as divine, but perhaps they were survivors, refugees of collapsed civilizations who carried knowledge into lands where it had been lost. To those they encountered, their skills would have seemed miraculous, their memories godlike. Over time, their stories became myth, but at their core may lie the real journeys of survivors teaching the next age. Even in more recent history, echoes of survival persist. The Polynesians navigated the Pacific using methods passed down orally, preserving star maps and ocean knowledge without writing. Aboriginal Australians hold Dreamtime stories that describe landscapes as they were tens of thousands of years ago, including coastlines that have long since vanished under the sea. These are not just myths, they are memories carried across generations with such accuracy that they serve as living maps of lost worlds. Survivors preserved them because memory was survival. Forgetting meant repeating disaster. Knowledge, however, is fragile. Each collapse strips away vast amounts of it, leaving only fragments. Survivors may preserve astronomy but lose metallurgy. They may remember myths of fire from the sky but forget the science behind it. This explains why ancient cultures appear to leap forward suddenly, because survivors injected advanced fragments into societies that were otherwise primitive. Yet the knowledge is always incomplete, like shards of a shattered mirror. Each new civilization rebuilds from pieces, never the whole. That is why the pyramids, the Mayan calendar, and Göbekli Tepe feel like puzzles. They are fragments of memory frozen in stone, the best survivors could do to carry knowledge forward before it was lost again. But survivors also carry trauma. Myths of floods, fire, and destruction are not just records of events. They are warnings encoded in story. The gods grew angry. The world was drowned. Weapons of fire destroyed cities. These are not just tales of divine punishment. They are survivors' attempts to explain to their children what had happened, to make them remember that arrogance, war, or carelessness could end everything. The warnings were not metaphor, they were survival manuals. And yet, over time, their lessons became allegory, then superstition, until the warnings were forgotten, leaving new civilizations to repeat the cycle. What makes survivors so compelling is how they connect the impossible evidence. How do myths of floods match geological sea level rises? Survivors remembered. How do cultures separated by oceans share the same stories of gods descending from the sky? Survivors carried fragments across continents. How do ruins like Göbekli Tepe appear suddenly, far more advanced than their supposed time? Survivors rebuilt, encoding memory into stone. The anomalies make sense when we consider that knowledge does not come from nowhere. It survives catastrophe in the hands of a few, only to seed the next age. The unsettling truth is that we too will leave survivors. If catastrophe struck tomorrow, asteroid, war, climate collapse, a few would endure. They might huddle in remote places carrying fragments of our world, scraps of books, half-remembered science, myths of cities that touch the sky. Over generations, those fragments would become distorted stories. To their descendants, we would be gods who wielded fire, built flying machines, and vanished in hubris. And thousands of years from now, when new civilizations rose, they would dig into the earth, find the fragments, and wonder who we were, just as we now puzzle over those who came before. The survivors of forgotten ages are the hidden thread linking past to present. They are why myths align with geology, why ruins defy timelines, and why fragments of advanced knowledge appear where they shouldn't. Without them, nothing of the past would remain. With them, we inherit whispers of memory, enough to remind us that civilization is fragile, and that when catastrophe comes, survival means not just living, but remembering. Because in the end, survivors are not just people, they are carriers of history, the bridge between worlds lost and worlds yet to come. The greatest mysteries of our past are not always hidden in remote jungles or buried beneath the sea. Sometimes they are right in front of us, artifacts, discoveries, and accounts that don't fit the accepted narrative. These pieces of the puzzle are often labelled as hoaxes, ignored, or quietly shelved away in museum basements, never displayed to the public. This is the shadow world of forbidden archaeology, the realm of discoveries too disruptive, too inconvenient for mainstream history to accept. It is here, in the gaps between what is admitted and what is dismissed, that the most tantalizing clues to forgotten civilizations lie. The problem begins with how rigidly history is taught. Archaeology is supposed to tell a story of linear progress, from stone tools to bronze, from primitive huts to cities, from ignorance to science. But when something emerges that doesn't fit this model, like a human footprint in 300 million-year-old coal or a machine part embedded in stone, it isn't studied, it's explained away or hidden. The London Hammer, encased in rock said to be over 100 million years old, is one such example. Instead of rewriting the textbooks, skeptics argued the rock must have formed around the hammer recently, a convenient explanation that allowed the narrative to remain intact. Yet the hammer itself, with its metallurgical composition unlike anything expected from the 19th century, sits as a mute reminder that some discoveries are not given the scrutiny they deserve. Another case is the so-called Kozo artifact. In 1961, rock collectors near Olancha, California, found what looked like a geode. Inside was an object resembling a spark plug, complete with ceramic and metal parts, embedded in material estimated to be hundreds of thousands of years old. Dismissed as a hoax or a misidentified modern object, the artifact eventually disappeared from public view. But the story persists, because if real, it would prove that advanced technology existed long before our official timeline allows. Equally baffling are the numerous reports of giant skeletons unearthed across North America in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Newspapers of the time describe skeletons standing 8 to 12 feet tall, often found in burial mounds. These accounts were widespread, from Ohio to Wisconsin to West Virginia. Yet as institutions like the Smithsonian gained control over excavations, the reports stopped, and the skeletons vanished. Critics argue the stories were exaggerations or fabrications, but the sheer volume of reports makes dismissal suspicious. Could it be that entire races of giants, remembered in myth as the Nephilim or Titans, once walked the earth, only to be erased from official history? If so, why suppress such evidence? Perhaps because it threatens the neat evolutionary ladder we have been taught. Forbidden archaeology also includes artifacts that appear far too advanced for their time. In South America, golden figurines resembling modern airplanes have been found in ancient tombs. Aerodynamic tests suggest they could actually fly if scaled up. Yet they are described as zoomorphic ornaments, their resemblance to aircraft brushed aside. Similarly, ancient maps like the Piri Reis map of 1513 depict coastlines of Antarctica before they were officially discovered, and more shockingly, before they were covered in ice. How could a 16th century mapmaker know what Antarctica looked like thousands of years ago? Mainstream explanations point to guesswork or copies of older maps, but if those older maps existed, who made them? And when? Even tools and weapons unearthed in ancient layers are sometimes ignored. Nails, screws, and metal spheres have been reported in strata millions of years old. The Dorchester pot, a bell-shaped metal vessel blasted from solid rock in 1852, was carefully documented but then vanished. These artifacts, if accepted, would force us to confront the possibility that industrial or even technological civilizations existed long before ours, leaving behind only fragments. Instead, they are dismissed, ridiculed, or quietly forgotten. The suppression doesn't always happen intentionally. Sometimes it is cultural bias. Archaeologists are trained within a framework, and anything that challenges it is instinctively doubted. A footprint alongside dinosaur tracks? Impossible. Advanced metallurgy in the Bronze Age? An error. Cities older than agriculture? Misdated. Yet discoveries like Göbekli Tepe, once thought impossible, have already rewritten history, proving that primitive people could build monumental architecture before farming. If Göbekli Tepe was dismissed for decades until it was finally excavated, how many other sites are ignored today because they don't fit expectations? There are also more deliberate cases. Whistleblowers claim that institutions like the Smithsonian deliberately hid or destroyed giant skeletons to protect the conventional narrative. While hard evidence for such conspiracies is scarce, the pattern of disappearances is suspicious. Similarly, artifacts that hint at contact between distant cultures, like Egyptian-style mummies in South America or Roman coins in North America, are dismissed as forgeries or accidents. Yet trade and contact across oceans may have been more common than we believe. Suppressing these possibilities maintains the illusion that civilizations developed in isolation, rather than inheriting knowledge from global or even pre-global networks of survivors. Even mythology is treated as forbidden evidence. The Vedic descriptions of Vimanas, flying craft powered by unknown energy, are dismissed as allegory. The Mayan Popol Vuh, with its accounts of gods of fire and flood, is treated as metaphor. Yet when these stories align with geological and archaeological anomalies, when myths of floods match sudden sea level rises, or myths of fire from the sky match impact craters, they are still ignored. Why? Because admitting myths contain truth would collapse the boundary between story and history, forcing a re-evaluation of everything we think we know. The bigger question is why this suppression happens at all. Part of it is human nature. No one wants to rewrite the textbooks they've built their careers on. Another part is control. If civilizations have risen and fallen many times before, it undermines the idea that our society is unique and inevitable. If advanced knowledge has existed before, it threatens the narrative that progress is linear and cumulative. And if catastrophes have reset the world over and over, it forces us to confront our own vulnerability. Suppressing anomalies maintains the illusion of stability, the comforting story that we are the pinnacle of history rather than just another cycle. Yet forbidden archaeology cannot be erased completely. Stories of suppressed discoveries circulate, alternative researchers document anomalies, and curious minds connect the dots. Each piece, on its own, may be explained away. But together, they form a pattern, a record of civilizations lost, knowledge hidden, and evidence suppressed. They remind us that history is not as complete or certain as we are told. Beneath the surface lies another story, one of cycles, forgotten ages, and survivors who tried to pass on what they could. The irony is that forbidden archaeology may not stay forbidden forever. Just as Göbekli Tepe forced scholars to admit that history is older and stranger than believed, future discoveries may one day vindicate today's anomalies. The giant skeletons, the impossible artifacts, the submerged ruins, if even one of them is conclusively proven, the entire narrative collapses. And when that happens, history will not just be rewritten, it will be reborn. We like to imagine time as a straight line. From the discovery of fire to the launch of satellites, the story is told as a march of progress, each generation climbing higher on the ladder of human achievement. But the deeper we look into myths, ruins, fossils and anomalies, the more the evidence suggests otherwise. Time, at least for civilizations, is not linear but cyclical. Great cultures rise, flourish and collapse, only for the survivors to rebuild, carrying fragments of the old into the new. These cycles are remembered in myth, written in stone, and recorded in the very geology of the Earth. They remind us that we may not be the first advanced civilization, nor will we be the last. We are just one turn of a wheel that has spun many times before. Cultures across the world preserve this truth in their stories. The Mayans spoke of the 5 suns, each an age of humanity destroyed by catastrophe. One age ended in fire, another in flood, another in storms, and another in jaguars that devoured mankind. The Hopi described similar cycles. The first world destroyed by fire, the second by ice, the third by flood, and the fourth, the one we live in now, destined to collapse before the fifth arises. Hindu cosmology goes even further, describing vast cycles of time known as yugas and kalpas, stretching for millions of years. In this system, civilizations rise in golden ages of prosperity and then decline into dark ages of corruption, only to be wiped clean and restarted. These stories are not unique. They echo across continents, suggesting that ancient peoples were not inventing fantasy, but recording a reality they had lived through. Civilizations wiped away in cycles, leaving survivors to tell the tale. Even Plato's story of Atlantis fits into this cyclical framework. In his dialogues, he describes not just one lost civilization but many, stating that humanity has risen and fallen countless times, each collapse wiping out knowledge and forcing survivors to start over. To Plato, Atlantis was simply the most recent of these forgotten ages, not an isolated story, but part of a pattern. His words, often dismissed as allegory, align perfectly with global myths of cycles and resets. If we take him at face value, then our current civilization is not exceptional, but simply the latest turn in an ancient cycle. Geology too preserves these cycles. Extinction events, like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, or the sudden onset of the Younger Dryas, are markers of global resets. Each time life is nearly extinguished, then slowly rebounds, eventually giving rise to new forms. In between, there are smaller cycles, sudden climate changes, volcanic winters, and sea level rises that devastate entire regions. Civilizations built on fragile coasts are drowned. Empires dependent on fragile ecologies collapse. These events appear random, but when mapped across time, they form a rhythm: creation, destruction, renewal. The Earth itself seems to move in cycles, and civilizations are swept up in its rhythm, whether they realize it or not. But cycles are not only physical, they're also cultural. When civilizations grow, they pass through predictable stages: expansion, prosperity, excess, and decline. The Sumerians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans all followed this pattern. At their peak, they believed themselves invincible. At their collapse, they were humbled by famine, war, or disease. Each time, survivors carried fragments of knowledge forward, but each time most of what was built was lost. The Library of Alexandria burned. The knowledge of Mayan astronomy was forgotten. The engineering secrets of Incan stonework disappeared. In every cycle, brilliance is achieved, and in every cycle, brilliance is erased. What remains are fragments, myths, and puzzles for the next age to rediscover. What makes this pattern unsettling is how closely it mirrors where we stand today. Our civilization is global, interconnected, and technologically advanced, but it is also fragile. We depend on complex systems that can collapse with startling speed. Power grids, food supply chains, financial systems, even the stability of our climate. History shows that collapses often happen suddenly, triggered by disaster or conflict. If cycles are real, then we are not unique. We are simply another civilization at its peak, poised at the edge of decline, just as countless others have been before us. Some researchers argue that the cycle is not just cultural but cosmic. Ancient myths describe alignments of stars and planetary cycles as influencing the fate of civilizations. The Mayan long count calendar, often misunderstood as predicting the end of the world in 2012, may actually mark the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Hindu cosmology describes the Kali Yuga, an age of darkness and decline, which which will eventually give way to a new golden age. Even modern science hints at cosmic cycles, with evidence of periodic comet showers, solar fluctuations and geomagnetic reversals that coincide with mass extinctions and climate upheavals. Whether natural or supernatural, the message is the same. Civilizations do not last forever. They are temporary, cyclical, and vulnerable to forces far larger than themselves. The idea of forgotten ages becomes clearer when we look at anomalies. How do we explain advanced ruins like Göbekli Tepe, built thousands of years before civilization was supposed to exist? How do we explain the sudden emergence of mathematics, astronomy, and writing in Sumer, as though knowledge appeared fully formed? These make sense if we see them not as beginnings, but as restarts. Civilizations rebooting with fragments of knowledge carried from earlier ages. Survivors brought memory, but memory distorted by time, myth, and trauma. They built with what they could remember, leaving behind puzzles for us to untangle. Even our progress today may be less original than we think. The myths of flying machines, energy weapons, and nuclear-like blasts described in the Mahabharata or other ancient texts sound eerily familiar. Are we rediscovering what was once known, repeating the cycle of invention and destruction? If so, then our pride in being the first may be misplaced. We are not the beginning of the story, but one chapter in a book that has been written many times before. The most haunting part of cyclical time is its inevitability. Linear history offers hope. Progress continues, knowledge accumulates, and humanity marches toward a brighter future. Cyclical history offers only humility. No matter how advanced, every civilization falls. The wheel turns, the reset comes, and the survivors carry fragments into the next age. Our skyscrapers, satellites, and databases may feel indestructible, but to future generations they may be nothing more than myths of a time when people flew in metal birds and lit their cities with captured lightning. They will inherit fragments, just as we did, and they will rebuild, believing themselves unique just as we do. But perhaps there is a deeper lesson. If time is cyclical, then the point is not to escape the cycle, but to recognize it. Myths of floods and fire were not meant to depress, but to warn. They reminded survivors that arrogance leads to collapse, that nature is indifferent, and that survival depends on humility and memory. If we see the cycle clearly, perhaps we can extend our age, preserving more knowledge for the next. Perhaps we can break the pattern of total loss, leaving behind not just ruins and myths, but enough wisdom for future civilizations to understand who we were. Cycles of time and forgotten ages remind us that history is deeper, stranger, and more fragile than we imagine. They tell us that we are not the first nor the pinnacle, but simply the latest turn of the wheel, and they whisper one chilling truth: the wheel always turns again. If there's one thread weaving through every story of lost civilizations, forbidden artifacts, global resets, and cyclical time, it is this. We're not as permanent as we believe. The ruins scattered across deserts, the myths of floods and fire, the anomalies hidden in rock and legend, all of them whisper that humanity has walked this path before. Civilizations rise, they dazzle the world with brilliance, and then they fall, leaving survivors to rebuild from fragments. Each time knowledge is carried forward, but never whole. Each time warnings are encoded in story, myth, and stone. And each time those warnings are forgotten, dismissed as allegory or fantasy, until the cycle begins again. We are told to trust in progress, in the march of technology and science, yet history shows us that progress is fragile, easily erased, and quickly lost. The truth is that we may not be unique at all. We may simply be another turn in the endless wheel of time. Think about it. If even one of the anomalies is true, if even one of the forbidden artifacts is genuine, it rewrites everything we think we know. A single spark plug embedded in stone, a single ancient text describing weapons of mass destruction, a single ruin predating civilization by thousands of years. These are not mistakes, but messages. They suggest that others before us reached heights we cannot imagine, only to collapse, their memory surviving only in whispers. We may laugh at myths of Atlantis or flying Vimanas, but our own world already holds nuclear weapons, supersonic jets, and space stations. To future survivors, if we fall, how much of that will sound like myth? how much of it will be dismissed as fantasy? We are not immune to the cycle, we are in the middle of it. The conclusion we are left with is both humbling and terrifying. Civilization is not a straight climb but a fragile balance. And the Earth has a way of resetting itself when that balance tips too far. Fire from the sky, floods from the deep, earthquakes, plagues, or our own hubris. All of them can erase what we build in a heartbeat. What survives is never the monuments, never the libraries, never the machines. What survives are the survivors themselves, carrying fragments of memory, retelling the stories, trying desperately to warn the next age, and yet we keep forgetting. But here lies the paradox. If cycles are inevitable, then perhaps our role is not to break them but to prepare for them, to remember, to pass forward enough truth that when the reset comes, and it always comes, the next age will know who we were, what we achieved, and what mistakes we made. Perhaps that is why myths of floods and fire endure, not as fairy tales but as instructions, warnings hidden in plain sight. We can ignore them, as so many before us did, or we can listen and take them seriously, because the cycle does not care whether we believe in it or not. And so the final question is not whether forgotten civilizations existed, or whether forbidden evidence is real. The question is this: will we be remembered as the civilization that broke the cycle, or as just another layer of ruins, another myth of gods who flew in the sky and vanished in fire? The answer will not be written in textbooks or carved in stone. It will be written in how we act now, and whether we choose to remember or forget, to listen or dismiss, to prepare or to fall. History may be cyclical, but memory is a choice. And perhaps, just perhaps, it is memory that decides whether the wheel must always turn, or whether one day humanity can finally step off it